Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're looking at a match where the margins were just so microscopic.
Truly microscopic.
Yeah, where a single step in the wrong direction or, a fraction of a misjudgment in length completely decided the game.
Right.
We are breaking down the tactical tape from the recent T20 clash between Pakistan and Sri Lanka. I mean, over 400 runs scored in a single afternoon.
Which is just staggering.
It really is. And it all came down to a 5-run difference. Pakistan set this massive target of 212, and Sri Lanka chased it right down to the final deliveries, falling just 5 runs short.
It is the exact type of fixture that exposes a team's tactical foundational strength. Because when you have a flat deck and two batting lineups operating in fifth gear, those traditional match winners, they often get neutralized.
They cancel each other out.
Exactly. It becomes a game of extreme game awareness, just capitalizing on incredibly brief windows of vulnerability.
And that is exactly what we are going to tear into today for you. We're looking at the field placements, the bowling changes, the run rate management, and really the sheer psychological weight of a 210-plus chase. Sitting across from me to help parse out all this data is our resident tactical expert. So, okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
Starting with Pakistan's batting blueprint, the strategy clearly revolves around what we often call controlled aggression.
Right.
And they executed this opening surge that just put Sri Lanka on the back foot immediately.
It was a masterclass, really. A masterclass in setting the tempo without taking reckless risks. Because in modern T20, your opening partnership dictates the entire trajectory of the innings.
Oh, absolutely.
What Pakistan did brilliantly here was establish this dual threat dynamic from ball one. You had one player anchoring the innings, right? Just working his way to a century by playing conventional, low-risk cricket shots.
Keeping the board ticking.
Exactly. While his partner operated at a strike rate well over 200, he was essentially delivering a 40-ball blitz.
Right. And it wasn't just, mindless slogging.
Yeah.
You look at the wagon wheels from those first 6 overs. They were actively manipulating Sri Lanka's field. They knew the captain had to keep certain fielders inside the circle during the power play. So they were actively stepping out of the crease, completely altering the lengths, and hitting over the top of mid-off and mid-on.
That manipulation is the absolute core of controlled aggression. They were dictating where the bowler had to pitch the ball. But I think the true hallmark of this innings wasn't just the boundary hitting during the power play.
Right.
No, it was the immediate aftermath. Often, teams see a massive drop in run rate as soon as the field spreads in over number 7. Pakistan didn't let that happen. They transitioned seamlessly into elite strike rotation.
Yeah, dropping the ball into the covers with soft hands, stealing those quick singles, and ensuring the bowler never got to settle into a rhythm against one specific batter.
Exactly. And the psychological toll that takes on a bowling unit, it's massive. Think about it from the bowler's perspective.
Oh.
A frontline bowler spends an entire over trying to set up a right-hander. They are angling the ball across him, setting the field heavy on the offside. Suddenly, they concede a soft single on the 4th delivery.
And now they're bowling to a left-hander.
Right. Now they have to completely recalibrate their line, their length, their field for a completely different batter. It completely fractures a bowler's rhythm. Pakistan used that constant rotation to maintain a steady hum of productivity.
They also paired that rotation with a very deliberate surgical attack on Sri Lanka's 5th bowler quota. Looking at the over-by-over run rate, they clearly circled those specific overs.
Oh, without a doubt.
They identified the part-timer, recognized his lengths were slightly predictable, and just relentlessly accessed the shorter boundary.
It is a fundamental structural vulnerability in almost every T20 lineup. You have your 4 premium specialists, but making up those final 4 overs is always a headache for the fielding captain. Pakistan's batters recognized who had the ball, calculated the matchups, and went after him. By isolating and punishing that specific bowler, you force the opposing captain to panic.
Which means bringing back a premium bowler early.
Exactly. They have to burn an over from their strike bowler earlier than planned, and that ruins their entire death bowling strategy.
I see the logic there, I really do, but I have to push back a bit on this idea that Pakistan played a flawless tactical game.
Fair enough.
Because looking at the data between overs 13 and 16, they completely hit a wall. You might call it a transition phase, but looking at their shot selection, they lost a wicket and seemed to abandon that aggressive blueprint entirely.
Yeah.
To me, that doesn't look like controlled aggression. That looks like they lost their nerve when Sri Lanka brought their premium spinners back into the attack.
It is a fair critique, and it was undeniably their biggest vulnerability in the match. I wouldn't necessarily call it a total loss of nerve, though.
What would you call it then?
I'd call it a severe miscalculation of the par score. Overs 13 to 16 are incredibly tricky. You are trying to consolidate wickets for the final 4-over sprint, but if you drop your boundary percentage too drastically, you leave 15 to 20 runs out there on the pitch.
It's huge.
In a game decided by 5 runs, that mid-innings dip was a major tactical error. If Sri Lanka had managed a slightly stronger finish, we would be talking about that 3-over lull as the sole reason Pakistan lost the game.
Well, they managed to recover, obviously, with a brutal late-over acceleration that pushed them past 210. And that number is massive. Just pushing the total to 212 fundamentally changes the psychological landscape of the chase.
The psychology of run chasing is deeply tethered to these specific numerical thresholds. 200 is the classic barrier. It means requiring 10 runs and over right from the jump.
Right.
But 212, that extra 12 runs completely alters the risk-reward matrix for the chasing team. You can't just absorb 2 quiet overs and expect to catch up.
No, the math doesn't allow it.
It introduces scoreboard pressure before the umpires even walk out to the middle. It forces batters to take high-risk, low-percentage shots against the new ball simply to keep the required rate from ballooning early.
Which brings us perfectly to the second part of this narrative, Sri Lanka's response. They are staring down 212. It's a daunting target, but what stands out in the first half of their innings is that they refuse to implode. They actually built a highly resilient foundation.
They played the percentages beautifully early on. Chasing a mammoth total often results in a 3-wicket collapse inside the power play because batters are just swinging out of their shoes out of sheer panic.
Yeah, trying to win the game in the first 5 overs.
Exactly. Sri Lanka's top order avoided that trap. They kept the DLS par score in check, they targeted the right areas, and they kept that daunting required run rate within a manageable striking distance for the vast majority of the innings.
But they still lost by 5 runs. So where is the exact friction point? Because when you look at the scorecard, it doesn't scream dramatic collapse at all.
What's fascinating here is the absolute precision with which the data pinpoints the failure. It was a subtle, almost imperceptible loss of momentum. If you isolate overs 10 through 14, you see a drastic drop in Sri Lanka's boundary percentage.
Right, in the belly of the chase.
Exactly, right in the belly. While Pakistan used their middle overs to rotate the strike and manipulate the field, Sri Lanka got bogged down. They allowed the bowlers to dictate the lengths.
And you can't do that chasing 212.
When you're chasing 212, playing steady cricket in the middle overs is essentially going backward. You need periodic explosions. They desperately lacked that 15 or 20 run over to shatter the bowling side's confidence and flip the momentum.
Yeah.
Because they couldn't find that explosive over, the required rate began to creep up. It went from 10.5 to 11.2 to well over 12.
And that creeping run rate brings us to the climax of the match. Here's where it gets really interesting. The death overs, the 18th and 19th overs, where the margin for error evaporates entirely. Sri Lanka's execution at the death just wasn't clinical. They absorbed a couple of dot balls at the absolute worst possible moments.
The compounding math of a dot ball in the 18th over of a 210-plus chase is absolutely brutal.
Break that down for us.
Early in the game, you can brush a dot ball off. But when you need 13 runs and over, a single 0-run delivery is catastrophic.
Because the required rate on the remaining deliveries instantly spikes.
Precisely. If you need 12 runs off 6 balls, you're looking at 2 runs a ball. Very manageable.
Clear?
If you face a jot, you suddenly need 12 off 5. The pressure doubles instantly. The batter's mindset shifts from, I can pick my gap, to, I absolutely must hit this next ball over the ropes.
And the bowler knows that.
The bowler completely knows that. That makes the batter predictable. They clear their front leg, they lose their shape, and they play right into the bowler's hands. Those tiny moments of hesitation, those couple of deliveries where Sri Lanka failed to rotate the strike or find the boundary, they compounded the pressure so intensely that it manufactured the fatal 5-run deficit.
5 runs at 400-plus scored in the day, coming down to just hesitating on 2 deliveries in the 18th over.
Yeah.
That is wild.
It really is.
And it perfectly sets up the third major theme of this match. The decisive turning points with the ball. Because we can talk about the batters all day, but this game was won and lost by game management in the field. Let's compare the 2 bowling attacks.
It truly is a tale of 2 entirely different tactical approaches.
Looking at Sri Lanka first, they actually had a decent start with the new ball, but they completely lost their grip on the game between overs 6 and 10. They disastrously leaked runs right after the fielding restrictions were lifted.
Which goes directly back to their inability to protect that fifth bowler we discussed earlier. When the field spreads after the power play, your primary goal as a fielding unit is to apply a squeeze.
Right.
You push the boundary riders back, you bowl line and length, and you force the batters to take risks to find the fence. Sri Lanka failed to do that. They bowled both sides of the wicket, offered easy width, and just surrendered all control to the batting side.
Now compare that to Pakistan's approach in the exact same phase of the game. They utilized a spin chokehold that was just clinically executed.
It was a tactical masterstroke from the captain. Pakistan spinners didn't just bowl, they actively suffocated the Sri Lankan middle order. They bowled into the pitch, denying the batters any pace to work with.
Right, taking all the energy out of the ball.
They bowled tight, wide lines to the longer boundary, forcing the batters to fetch the ball and hit against the spin. They set a heavy lakeside field and essentially dared Sri Lanka to hit them over the covers.
No, they couldn't do it.
No, that drop in Sri Lanka's boundary percentage in overs 10 to 14 wasn't just poor batting. It was entirely engineered by Pakistan spinners taking the pace off the ball and executing their fields perfectly.
They threw a blanket over the chase. And that discipline set the stage for the clutch execution at the very end. Sri Lanka needs boundaries, the crowd is absolutely deafening, and Pakistan's fast bowlers step up in the death overs.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the execution of those final 2 overs is phenomenal. To close out a game on a flat pitch against set batters requires nerves of absolute steel. Pakistan's quicks went to the wide Yorkers and the slower offcutters, and they nailed them.
But the margin for error there is practically zero. If the bowler misses the wide Yorker by an inch on the leg side, it's a full toss that gets hit for 6. If they miss it wide, it's an extra run and the ball has to be rebowled.
That is the ultimate test of a bowler's technique under pressure. You have long off and long on, push right back to the fence, fine leg up inside the circle. The bowler knows that if they miss their spot by a fraction of an inch, the game is lost.
The pressure is unimaginable.
To repeatedly execute highly technical defensive deliveries under that kind of extreme duress is what separates good teams from great ones. Pakistan's discipline at the death is ultimately what secured the win.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now? Why should you care about the minutiae of T20 field settings and required run rates? When you pull back from the specific cricket tactics, the architecture of a high-stakes run chase is remarkably similar to the architecture of managing any high-stress project or business goal.
The parallels are undeniable. It all comes down to resource allocation, momentum management, and executing under a strict deadline.
Take the danger of that middle over lull. Overs 13 to 16 for Pakistan, or overs 10 to 14 for Sri Lanka. Whether you are chasing 212 runs or executing a 6-month corporate strategy, that middle phase is where the trap lies. The initial launch excitement is worn off, the deadline still feels comfortably far away, and it is incredibly easy to just coast. But as we saw with Sri Lanka's drop in boundary percentage, coasting is exactly how you lose control of the math. You have to actively hunt for that momentum-shifting milestone to keep the required rate of your project manageable.
And similarly, look at Pakistan's strategy of isolating Sri Lanka's fifth bowler. That is the very definition of strategic problem solving. You don't just attack a massive problem blindly.
And burn yourself out.
Exactly. You analyze the landscape, you find the structural weak point, the one area where the defense is thinnest or the process is most inefficient, and you pour your resources into exploiting that specific gap.
Yes. And perhaps the most brutal lesson is the cost of inaction, the dot balls. In a high-pressure scenario, hesitating or failing to move the needle forward compounds the pressure on the very next step.
Right.
If you miss a minor benchmark on a Tuesday, Wednesday's workload just got exponentially heavier. Tiny moments of hesitation create massive, crushing pressure right at the final deadline.
This raises an important question for you listening to this right now. Think about the high-stakes deadlines in your own life or career. When the pressure is at its absolute peak, when you are operating in your own personal death overs with the game on the line, how disciplined is your execution?
Great question.
Are you able to deliver your own metaphorical wide Yorkers and off-cutters? Can you execute those highly technical, precise actions that require total focus? Or does the pressure force you to lose your shape and miss your mark? Pakistan walked away with the victory because, in those final crucial moments, their execution under pressure was absolutely flawless.
It is a phenomenal takeaway. Clarity and discipline when the noise is at its absolute loudest. To briefly summarize the ultimate formula we've unpacked today, Pakistan secured this thriller through a potent combination of aggressive intent at the top of the order, smart field manipulation, and incredibly clutch, disciplined bowling at the death.
Right on.
Sri Lanka, conversely, mounted a truly valiant chase and paced themselves well initially, but they ultimately fell short because they lacked that one defining momentum surging over in the middle phase, and they let the dot balls pile up at the end.
It was a clash of two very distinct tactical realities, and it leaves us with a truly provocative thought moving forward. We know these two sides are likely to meet again later in the tournament. They both look incredibly well-balanced and dangerous. It will undoubtedly be another tight contest. But I want to pose this to you. If both of these teams study this exact match tape, who actually carries the psychological advantage into the rematch?
It seems obvious to say Pakistan, but I'm not so sure.
Exactly. Think about the layers here. Is the advantage with Pakistan. They won the game, they have the points, they know their death bowling can withstand an onslaught. But this tape also exposes a glaring vulnerability.
Middle overs.
They slowed down significantly in overs 13 to 16. Sri Lanka now has concrete data showing that Pakistan has a middle over soft underbelly they can exploit if they deploy their spinners correctly.
Or does the advantage actually sit with Sri Lanka?
Right. They lost the match, but they now possess incredibly dangerous knowledge. They know that their batting depth, even without playing a perfect game, even without hitting that massive 20 run over in the middle phase, is capable of almost scaling a 212-run mountain against a top-tier bowling attack.
Yeah.
They prove to themselves that no target is truly out of reach. Sometimes the team that loses a microscopic 5-run game walks away having learned far more than the team that actually won it.
The winner takes the points, but the loser might just take the blueprint for the rematch. That is going to be rattling around in my brain all day. We are going to leave you to ponder that one. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into the microscopic tactical margins of top-tier T20 cricket. Keep questioning the tactics around you. Keep looking for those tiny edges in your own execution. And as always, stay curious. We will catch you on the next deep dive.